Thank you very much for having me. Obviously, I alluded to it, having played up in Edmonton and grew up as a Canadian, having the opportunity to come to California has been rescued from Edmonton winters has been phenomenal, and I love coming out to Palm Springs. My wife and kids and I do it regularly, and we truly do enjoy it, and so thank you very much for having me. Okay, Bruce, Nick, here you go, fellas. Obviously, there's people have alluded a little bit to some of the conflicts between the business side and the creative side. We'll get to the movie Alpha Dog, okay, that you both had worked on before. Was this the first time you two worked together?
Yep.
Now,
Actually,
Bruce,
Nick,
how did you come about hiring Nick?
Well, Nick, he hired me. The reality of it all was that Nick actually, we met playing golf, and Nick was interested one time in doing my story, so we started talking about that. And Nick had a screenplay called Alpha Dog, and among places that it was going to be shooting was here in Palm Springs, by the way. So we discussed it, and eventually my partner, Steve Markoff, and I decided that we thought it was a terrific film and a great opportunity. So we had distribution already with Lee's firm, Warner Brothers New Line, on the domestic side. On the foreign side, we had another company called Capital. And we had the pieces put together, and we needed some pre-production funding, and Steve Markoff funded that in the beginning. And you know, it went from there. Then Nick wanted to make this film, and we supported it, and we started that way. It got more exciting after that.
Now, it is a question I do want to get to, Nick, the budget. Now, you go into a movie with a budget. You're basically how the arrangement is on dollars to use and whatever, and then it seemed to go in a different direction. Is that true?
Yeah, it did. It did. There was a couple of major problems we had along the way, one of which we were writing a story about a guy who was a fugitive from the law, one of the youngest guys that ever just kind of disappeared off the face of the earth. And as we were shooting, the guy got caught, which changed our story a little bit, and it caused me to rewrite a little some of it. But you know, budgets tend to go up. It's hard to stay in budgets at a certain time, and I was lucky enough to work with producers that understood that. You know, not initially, but
Well, here's the way it goes. Here's the way it goes. You don't have to pay, right? You don't have to pay, but by the way, the actors are gone. So, you know, do what you want. Come on now.
I'm not sure that's exactly how it went.
Exactly how terrific it is.
Look.
And by the way, I'm not directing the film anymore. Get another guy. Come on.
I think it's important to understand that really what you try to do is, as a filmmaker, as a creative person, is you work for, there shouldn't be really any acrimony between producers and filmmakers. There shouldn't really be. And there shouldn't be an us versus them type of mentality at all. When you make a film, what you are as a creative person is your quality control. That's what you do. If the bosses don't know how to spend the money, it can be problematic. But
on this particular film, actually, Nick and I were on the same team
For sure.
because
Bruce is one of my closest friends in the world.
yeah, and Nick and I
Not anymore, but I mean we were.
Yeah, we were. We were, you know. But you know, we'll see what happens tonight, Nick. See how good you really are. You know. But you know, Nick, as Nick said, you know, the talent has to make the film, and talent does rule the film business ultimately because they're the ones that know what the heck they're doing. And the money, unfortunately, from time to time, we'll have to step in and try to make it financially responsible. Fortunately for us, a friend of mine stepped in, who I'd made a movie with many years ago called Blame It on Rio, with Michael Caine and Demi Moore, and said, I'm going to get back to the business. So my ears are perked up, and he said, I'll tell you what, instead of you guys funding the film like we were doing, I'll fund 100% of it. Well, the minute somebody else's money is going to go up, I'm on Nick's side. Now we want to make the best film possible. And you know, in Nick's defense, and the defense of most top directors, they're artists, you know, and they have to make what they view as the film to make. And the job of the producer should be to help support that in every way they can, which is what I certainly try to do with Nick, and hopefully most producers
You did do that.
I tried, you know.
You did do that.
Yeah.
I mean, like it or not, the film turned out to be exactly the film that I wanted to make, which is kind of what you're trying to do in the beginning anyway. You know, in all businesses, is there contingencies, is there overages, is there plus minuses what you have to spend? I imagine that they are. Film business the fluctuations tend to be a little bit more. But the greatest thing I can say about my producers, Sydney, who's not here, Bruce and Steve, is they allowed me to make the film I wanted to make. Some films hit the zeitgeist and make lots of money. Some don't. I'm proud of that film. I think it is representative. My kids went to school with those guys, so it was important for me to make that film.
And if you haven't seen it, you really should check it out.
It's a lot of foul language.
Yeah, it's a true story about a kid a team that committed a murder, and it's a true story, it's a compelling story, and I think it was, like Nick said, he made a terrific film, and of all the films I've been involved with, it's certainly one of the ones that I'm most proud of. And again, financially, it did very well, and it's something that we're all proud of, and especially Nick, who's the filmmaker. And by the way, it's not a tough call as a producer. When the director comes to you and says, let me tell you what I can get for you. For basically scale, he brought in Justin Timberlake, Bruce Willis, Sharon Stone, Emile Hirsch, Anton Yeltsin, who am I leaving out? Courtney Cox.
Well, all the girls became stars too. Amanda Seyfried became a star.
Amanda Seyfried became a huge star.
Olivia became a star.
Olivia, yeah,
Olivia
exactly.
Wilde, yeah.
Oscar winners. A lot of people that he found, which is one of his great talents, is finding talent and developing them, which is what he
Find
did.
them a little too early. We didn't exploit them. We just found them.
We should have exploited them. That's our mistake.
Now, Bruce, you weren't so understanding when my budget went up twice as much.
Hey,
You traded me.
you were the most valuable asset I had,
Mr. McSorley.
But Marty, in fairness to Marty, as he knows, the world knows basically, that when I got Gretzky, Wayne and I spoke way before the trade order happened, and all Wayne cared about is, you got to get Marty, you got to get Marty. I said, oh God. So when I called his general manager, when I called the owner of the team, Edmonton, Peter Pocklington, and then later Glenn Sather, his general manager, they didn't care. Wayne, okay, fine. You cannot take Marty. We're not doing it. And he was my biggest pain that delayed the whole thing for about a month when I was trying to find a way to get him to agree to Marty finally. Marty was making back then about a huge, 135 a year?
I'm making 110,000. It was my fifth year in the league.
In your fifth year, he made 110. I gave him 115.
Canadian,
I
which
thought
was
it a
about
deal.
78,000 American
78
at the time.
78 American. Yeah, I think I gave you a big bump. What, 115?
And Bruce, you were more than fair. You were great. Seriously, if the other owners were as good as you. A few questions about the movie, though, I do want to get into is, you filmed part of the movie here in Palm Springs.
Yes, sir.
Where in Palm Springs did you do it? And if you could change anything in the film industry and filmmaking industry here in Palm Springs and in this area, what would you do?
Well, we filmed at a little hotel that's kind of right down the street on 111. 111. It's what? Caliente Tropics. We shot there, and we shot at a couple of homes out here. Where the actual events took place were in Santa Barbara, but Santa Barbara had some regulations we really didn't like to go up and shoot up there, so we changed the story and shot it here. I had a great time shooting here. I mean, maybe Bruce knows more about what it was like to film down here, but we had talent down here. We had people gave us access to whatever we needed to do, and as a filmmaker, you try to leave the place a little bit better than when you left it, and not cause too much trouble. Of which we did one of two, but
one hotel room crash is not that big a deal.
easy now.
Okay.
Easy now.
One, that was all.
But we had a great time down here. Look, I mean, from a creative point of view,
You did it.
this is the desert. It's stunningly beautiful. If it's attractive to shoot down here, certainly visually it'd be a place that a lot of people would come. And a lot of the business has been taken away by New Mexico, because New Mexico had a huge tax incentive for a while, which I think is not drying up, but the place has been what they call shot out, and they have so many saguaros down there. It really can't be any other place in New Mexico. But it is my belief that if this was a friendly place to shoot, that people will continue to come down here.
Now, Nick, in the movie Notebook, you star two future Canadian stars,
Yep.
Rachel McAdams and Ryan Gosling. What was your experience like working on that film?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm got to be the stupidest guy in the world. Back then, there was a huge tax break to go to Canada to shoot a film. I shot it in American, brought Canadians down here.
Bruce did the same thing.
Well, we shot the film in South Carolina, which was under the Southeast Treaty, which was it was less expensive to shoot than L.A. and New York, but still under a lot of guild regulation. But it's beautiful down there, you know. They have the Spanish moss and all the water down there. Ryan, I met. It was a kind of one of those kind of love stories where like there's a Romeo and a girl, and Ryan wasn't really, you know, he didn't really kiss the girl in the movies. I think he played like a skinhead Nazi or something before that. But I really liked his dynamics, and Rachel actually was an audition. She came in an audition, and we were going to hire somebody else, and she was the last one, and we switched our mind at the end. And Jenna, I was an in-house, you know, I knew her for a long time. And,
His mom.
And I hired
Jenna Rollins.
her. And one of the reasons I did the movie was to work with Jimmy Garner, and he was wonderful. Turned out to be a very lucky experience. People seemed to like the film, and I'm proud of it.
We used to give out handkerchiefs, you know, in the movie theaters for this movie. And if girls didn't cry, we knew we had trouble, right?
Yeah, they judged you if the people cried in that movie.
Yeah,
and thank God
exactly.
some of them did.
Yeah. And
No,
that's,
I'm sorry.
no, he made a great film, and something that everybody that talks about romantic films, I think, always looks back to The Notebook. And, you know, that's the paradigm today for a romantic motion picture.
They try to keep making that one, don't they?
They do. They keep
Yeah,
trying.
yeah.
They never get it right.
Now, both of you have been extremely involved in a high level of competitive sports. I'm going to ask each of you, how has sports played a role in your lives, and what are your favorite sports moments?
Well, certainly your career has been my favorite sports moment.
You got any more than that, Nick?
I know where I am. I grew up as a kid playing basketball. I'm a kid from New York. I came out to high school in California, and then I went back and played ball in college. I also ran track and field. I love baseball. I love hockey. I love all sports. I didn't own a sports team. I don't know anything about the business, but you know, if you come to my house, it's still ESPN on the TV.
Yeah, exactly.
Favorite athlete growing up, Nick?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I guess it was maybe Roberto Duran. I'm a big fight guy.
Yeah. Bruce, obviously, your involvement with the Kings,
Yeah.
your favorite moment in sports, and how did you ultimately get involved with the Kings and then become an owner?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, actually, it was funny. I was partners with the Hunt brothers in Dallas, who were approached by the NBA to start a franchise in Dallas, and they passed. They couldn't understand why a bunch of, Dallas was football country, and a bunch of guys running around in their underwear, they couldn't figure out why they'd ever sell in Dallas. But I got it, and I ended up buying half the franchise in 1980, which started to teach me a little bit about how you can build a sport that's not indigenous to that area, and that was not. And but I was friendly with Jerry Buss, who had bought the Lakers the year before I got involved with the Mavericks. And Jerry knew I was a big hockey fan. And I used to bug him all the time about, Jerry, why don't you sell me a piece of the Kings, or let's go with the Kings. And he never would until finally in 1985, I think he lost one of your poker games or something, Nick, because...
Easy.
Yeah, okay. He, put it this way, he ran out of dough, and so he needed some money, and he sold me a piece of the Lakers and 25% of the Kings in '86, and then '87 the balance of the team. And for me, it was a great experience to actually own something that I really love, and I was a big fan. And I think as an owner today, most owners today are big business, and they're more involved with the stadium and the other ancillary rights around it, television, the stadium, and so forth. I was a fan, so I just wanted to make a winner. And that's my goal at that time, and that's what got me involved in it. And that's why I got Marty and then his compatriot Wayne. But it was all about winning, and it was about exciting and making. LA is a different place. In Canada, as you all know, you sell tickets in Canada to terrible. Doesn't matter. Toronto hasn't won in what, forever? I guess.
Bruce, they still blame you for '93. You know that.
Oh yeah, they still blame me for '93. And only reason why we won, by the way, in '93 was this guy chasing Dougie Gilmore all over the ice, right? Chasing him all over the ice like this, and poor Dougie Gilmore had nowhere to go and nowhere to hide, right? That's what happened.
I'll tell you a funny story. We were walking through the airport, and after Game 6, both teams were walking through the same terminal. And I knew Dougie from junior, and I had a tremendous amount of respect for Doug Gilmore. And I kind of turned to him and I said, if the media could see us right now, they wouldn't want to believe it. Because we were just walking to our respective planes. I mean, he was a great competitor. A lot of respect with both of those teams.
Yeah, it was really a great time in Toronto.
Now, Bruce, when you got Wayne and you brought him in from Canada, obviously you talked about things that weren't necessarily in the fabric of sport at the time. All the licensing you talked about, all the sponsorship, branding the team. You took us on exhibition tours in markets that nobody else had ever been to. We played in rinks where we weren't sure if the ice was going to be ready for the exhibition game, simply because they weren't used to putting it in, but Bruce had a vision. Talk to me, or talk to all of us actually, about getting Wayne and what your vision was once you had Wayne Gretzky.
Well, getting Wayne again was all about, for me, winning, number one. And number two is, for LA especially, getting attention to the sport that I love. And he was the only player, and still to this day would be the only player, by the way, that would bring that attention to that sport. And so that was my dedicated dream. And when I did that, Wayne and I discussed this, and I said, Wayne, one of the big problems with hockey is lack of a national television contract. And we need to make this a national sport, so let's see if we can bring other cities and get them involved in hockey. So as long as I had Wayne, I took these guys on a tour all the time, all these cities, Dallas, Phoenix, and Florida, the two teams in Florida, Anaheim, every other place we went around, and we sold out every place we went. We even took them to Las Vegas in the middle of the summer, remember that? And played the New York Rangers at Caesar's Palace. In the middle, I put ice down, and we had the largest gate in the history of the NHL at the time, almost $2 million for one game, outside, where the ice was melting, and they were trying to make drinks out of the balance of what they had, because there was nothing there. I mean, these poor guys were out there trying to slush it around, but it was a great game. And that's what my dream was, and I think Wayne and I shared that dream at the time to try to make it a truly national sport, and that's what a real goal was. And fortunately, in some ways, fortunately not in some ways, we were successful in doing that and getting about a dozen franchises to come to the NHL.
Well, Bruce, I can absolutely tell you that the NHL became unregionalized because of you, with Anaheim, San Jose, Dallas, Phoenix directly involved. And I think if you knew the story, and maybe let's do the story about Michael Eisner coming into the league and bringing the Ducks into the league. You became chairman of the Board of Governors at that moment. Yep. Maybe you can touch upon that.
Well, again, my goal was to expand, and Michael Eisner and I were friends. He was the chairman of Disney at the time, and his two kids played hockey, junior hockey. So I tried to get Michael to get interested in hockey, but he couldn't care less. So I started bringing him to games. I really drag his kids there and make him come with it. And I got him into it a little bit. He got excited, but it was in my territory. So at that time, the fee to have a new franchise was $50 million. And Disney, as Nick knows, is historically cheap. They do not like to pay retail for anything. So therefore, it was like, we're not going to pay 50. Okay. Well, you also had to pay me something for invading my territory. Ultimately, we made a deal where the league got $25 million and I got $25 million for invading my territory, and Michael Eisner ultimately came along. But the way I really got him sucked in was two things. One was his kids, and I would bring them on our trips. One time I brought him to Vancouver for a game.
Well, we went to the '93 playoffs, and Michael Eisner and his kids were coming with us on the plane.
Yeah.
And then thus that summer we heard new owner Michael Eisner.
Yeah.
I knew you had a method to your madness, Bruce.
We brought him on the plane, and we had some fun with him, and his two, brought his kids and all that. And
So basically you shook him down.
I did. I shut him down. And then I called up Wayne Huizenga, at that time owned Blockbuster, and he was living in Florida. So I said, hey, Wayne, I know he owned the Miami Dolphins at the time. So I said, hey, Wayne, I know you like hockey. how about you buying a franchise for Miami? He said, Miami? I said, well, look, this is very secretive, but I got Michael Eisner to buy a franchise in Anaheim, which I had not at the time, but I told him I did. And then I went to Michael Eisner and I said, Michael, Blockbuster's going to come in. You got to come in before they do. So Michael goes, okay, we're in before Blockbuster, then we're in. And then I told the same thing to Huizenga, so they both came in at the exact same time, and I brought the two franchises, the one in Miami and Anaheim, at the same time by basically hustling them away, thinking that they needed to at the moment. So it worked out. We got $100 million. That to me was cool, you know. So that was nice. That would almost pay for one of Nick's movies, by the way. Almost.
Why the hell do I have to be the part of it? You told us great stories.
Nick, he gets you back. He keeps getting you back. Trust me, I hear it all the time.
What's going on?
Bruce, I'm going to bring up a name, and I'm going to tell a little story. I'm on the ice in Toronto in Maple Leaf Gardens, and every time I came off, there was no room on the bench. If you think of it in the old days, the coach used to step back where the fans could walk between the coach and the players to get to that one section behind the bench. I mean, the accessibility the fans had to the players, and I think Monica Seles getting stabbed, which scared the bejesus out of Wayne Gretzky.
Yep.
When Monica got stabbed, Wayne Gretzky became very, very scared to go out for dinner by himself, anything else. But so in Toronto, I'd come off, and there was no room on the bench, so you'd get there by the bench, I'd want to be by the door, I'd want to see everything that's going on the ice. In case somebody did something to one of my players, I wanted to know who did it and what happened. So I'm there, and I pick up a water bottle, and I take a drink, and this hand comes over. So I just put the water bottle in the hand, and I'm watching the game, and I could feel the water spray, and I looked over, and there's this guy sitting in the seat, putting water on his face, pouring it on his head, and he just says, "Tough shift," and handed the water bottle back to me. It was John Candy wearing a fur coat stuffed into the seat right by the bench. He didn't even look at me. He just took the water, sprayed it on him, and handed it back. It was vintage John. Well, and Bruce, you had a great relationship with John. We would see him around the team. Talk a little about your ownership with the Argos and your relationship with John.
Well, for those of you Canadians who know the CFL or care about it anymore or know about it, I didn't know a damn thing about the thing. And what happened was I was on the board of directors of Hollywood Park Racetrack, and a guy named Harry Ornest was also on the board, and he owned the Toronto Argonauts. We started talking about it a little bit, and he said, "Yeah, I want to sell the thing," and we went back and forth, and I said, "Okay." I went back to Gretzky, and I said, "Wayne, what's about the CFL thing?" "Oh yeah, I used to watch when I was a kid myself," and John Candy at that time was my celebrity captain for the Kings, because he was a great fan and a great guy, do everything. So I went to John, and they said, "Boy, we love that." So anyway, we bought the franchise. Wayne had 10%, John Candy had 10, and I had 80% of it. And John became unbelievable. He would go all over the place. Even Saskatchewan, Tim, you know, it's amazing. I mean, he would go everywhere to promote.
Even Saskatchewan.
Even Saskatchewan. Well, I threw that in because he's here, you know. And by the way, it's a great province, and we're doing some great new work. And if you need a job there, we get a lot of jobs. They're available up there right now, so anybody needs a job, including me, we're there. But anyway, John was a wonderful guy who lived and died for that sport, and we were fortunate. I said, "Wayne, I'm going to try to do another Gretzky deal if I can." So we talked about it, and that year, in 1991, the #1 draft pick for the National Football League that year was going to be Rocket Ismail. And, you know, so I met with Rocket, and I said, "You know, if you come to the NFL, you're going to be running back kickoffs, and you're not going to be a full-time wide receiver. If you come to the CFL, you're going to be the biggest thing that ever hit, the biggest." He said, "Okay." $17 million later, he said, "Okay." But he did, and we won the Grey Cup the first year we owned the franchise, playing in Winnipeg in temperatures I've never in my life ever want to see again. I thought it was the North Pole, I swear to God. It was the coldest thing I've ever been in my life. And, you know, I don't mind watching the Queen in the arena, you know, where it's warm, but I did not like watching that football game out there. And I remember coming down, there's a big memory for us, because I remember Doug Flutie was playing for Calgary against us that time, and Doug Flutie just threw a touchdown pass, took the lead. We all went down to the field, freezing to death, and we all got John and myself and Wayne, we all went down there, and Rocket was off the field. And I said to Wayne, and I were sitting there, and I said, "Hey, Rocket, great game." He had a tremendous game that time, and I said, "But, you know, didn't look too good for us." And Rocket turns to me and he says, and the game ain't over. And I got 17 million reasons to show you what I can do. And he ran the kickoff back for a touchdown, and we won the game, and won the Grey Cup off his touchdown run back. So it was a great memory for us, and we loved Toronto, and John sadly passing away on a film shortly thereafter was one of the saddest times that I ever experienced. He was a great man and a great Canadian, great fan.
Yeah, no, we love to see John. I remembered just before John passed, he was in our locker room. And I said, John, how you doing? And he said, I'm doing this movie, and he says, it's so hot. It's so uncomfortable. And I could just see, he looked like he had really been working hard, and then we sadly got the news. It really affected all of us because he was such a good friend to all of us.
Yeah, he was.
Nick, I want to ask you, obviously we grew up in the world of sports, and we have the people that we idolize and teams that we idolize. Which actors, directors do you look at and you say, my God, I really, really respect those guys. I love their work.
Well, I mean, I come from like my dad and mom were in show business, so I grew up around a lot of people just growing up in the house. As a kid, I never wanted to make any movies. I just wanted to get away from the house and run away as far as I could. But looking back on it, my dad was buddies with this guy named Don Siegel, who I think he's a wonderful director. He idolized Bob Aldrich, who directed Dirty Dozen and a million other great movies. So it was a different type of era back then. I kind of like, as a kid, I got lucky to hang around an older generation of actors and filmmakers who had much more liberty. What happened in the film business in the 1970s was, as many things was happening, like in the 1960s, it changed a lot of things. And the old way of, the old way of making films was not, they couldn't predict how much money they were going to make on films anymore. And so what happened is when Easy Rider came out and it made a lot of money, and when Bonnie and Clyde came out and those were both supposed to be bombs and they both made a lot of money, the studios kind of came back and said, we really don't know what we're doing. We don't know what the floor plan is to make a lot of money in movies. So what happened as a byproduct is they just invested in the filmmaker. And they would invest in a good story with a filmmaker, and they would give them a huge amount of liberties to make films. In that, you had Coppola and Ashby and Lumet and all these great filmmakers that would go out and they had a lot of liberty, so they went out and made great films during that era, and it was kind of like the golden age of filmmaking. Then the studios figured out, oh shoot, now we know what we're doing, and they took more control, and I'm not even saying that it's a wrong thing. Films make a lot of money these days, and even the ones that aren't very good, they do know how to quantify their product, and it's just a different system. So for me, the guys that I grew up idolizing was like Antonioni and Coppola and Ashby is my favorite, and I try to do the best I can, but those filmmakers were geniuses.
Is there any?
Of course, his father was probably the greatest filmmaker, independent filmmaker of his time, and probably had a fair amount of influence on you, I would think, too.
I would say so.
I would guess so.
But not as a filmmaker, really. More like he was the old man.
Yeah.
And as a man, he was a hell of a man, and I was happy to have him for as long as I did.
Is there any scripts or anything you're currently looking at right now?
Yeah, I'm about to go do a movie in New York. I'm about to go shoot a studio film in New York with Cameron Diaz, some kind of comedy, and which is unfortunately because I'm not that funny, but
he wrote the screenplay.
Wrote the screenplay, and we're gonna have a lot of fun on that. And then I hope to do a film with these two gentlemen when I come back.
Is there any one actor you'd really like to work with?
You know what's funny you say that? I get to work with Jack Nicholson in this film, and part of the great thing about being a filmmaker is that you get to work with all your favorite people. And not only are you like an employee, but you're actually a fan. I get to work with Jack, and I'm very happy.
Well, it's funny because it was only about 2 weeks after we got to LA in 1988, Wayne comes to practice and says, guess what? He says, I'm having dinner last night. I'm sitting there, and this guy comes up behind me, and he says, I don't see him, but all he says is, I'm going to have to go to one of those goddamn hockey games. And he says he sat there with Jack for about 15 or 20 minutes. So
And
Bruce
he did.
exposed us to a lot.
Yeah.
You two, working together. Anything in the future? Anything you're looking at, Bruce?
Well, we're always looking out at opportunities and things out here.
That means no.
Yeah, that means no. No. We're always looking at deals and Nick and films and all that is always part of my life, and we try to make it part of ours. We actually did something that Lee and the Canadian California Business Council helped us put together here with the folks here at the Desert Dunes Golf Course. So we did that transaction thanks to Lee and the council. So we're looking at opportunities and deals that come along all the time, and this happened to be one of them, and actually happened to be one that was directly connected to this. So it was very cool.
Bruce, one thing we never mentioned was your involvement in horse racing.
Yeah.
And, you might want to mention Golden Pheasant, but tell about Walter over in France.
Oh, my God. Well, Gretzky and I was in the horse business a long time, especially the Hunt brothers back from the 70s on, and Wayne asked me one day, maybe I should get a horse or two. Well, Wayne is so lucky, it's unbelievable. So one horse we buy, and the horse ends up winning the Arc de Triomphe, which is the biggest race in the world at that time. And, we paid a few $100,000 for the horse, we sold it for millions. But Walter Gretzky, Wayne's father, we brought to France for that race. And Walter, bless his heart, he worked for Bell Canada, and still did at that time. He didn't change his job, he just continued to work. He would go to France there, and Marty probably knows as much or more about it than I remember, but he was, he'd look around and say, they got nothing but fish here, and there's sauces and stuff, and he was a riot. He's a great guy and a great character to this day, and I speak to him, by the way, about once every couple of weeks. He calls me regularly still. I hear from him more than I do Wayne. So
Wayne was telling me that he said Walter is in the box, and the next box is the president of France.
Yeah.
And their horse wins, and there's Walter celebrating, and he says, just goes over to the president, hey, how are you? Shakes his hand, no big deal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And the same race, the Aga Khan had two horses in the race. They were the favorites. So you're the Aga Khan. So I say to Wayne, hey, Wayne, I want to introduce you to the Aga Khan. And, I explained to him who he was, spiritual leader and blah, blah, blah. So Wayne goes over with Walter, and I said, now, and his people said, you have to bow, and this is what you have to do, and this and that. So he did. And Walter goes over and says, hey, Aggie, how you doing? Oh, my God. I thought we were going to be killed, for sure. That was Walter.
You're lucky because you took those coins out of his country.
I did.
Any other sports, Bruce, you're looking at to be involved with? Anything you'd like to do? You've done so much. You've done so many. In my time with Bruce in L.A., I was just flipping through a photo album I had at home, and my brother was there, and he's like, that is, and I'm like, yep. He goes, well, and that is, yep. I says, and he goes, well, that, I'm like, yeah, it is. I've got a picture with Ronald Reagan in our locker room. Really wild story. We're in the locker room, we come out, we've got about 15 minutes before the media comes in, and Bruce would always come in, and so I took my jersey off, didn't really wear shoulder pads, I just had my suspenders, and two guys in suits come in, and they're in a hurry, and they're walking around the locker room, and I could see the little cord in behind their ear, and I'm thinking, God, bomb threat? Well, seriously, I'm sitting in the locker room, you're wondering, okay, what's going on? And not 30 seconds later, they walk out, and in comes Ronald and Nancy Reagan. And we had a bin in the middle of the locker room because we really felt we always had 15 minutes. The guys would strip down naked, put their underwear in their laundry bag, throw it in, and go to the shower, come out and talk to the media. So we had guys standing in the locker room, buck naked, and Nancy Reagan is about 10 feet into the locker room, and she realizes there's naked men, and she just stops. And she just gets very stoic, and she just kind of stares where the wall and the ceiling meet, and she just never took her eyes off there, but she wasn't flustered, she just shook hands. So I've got a picture with Ronald and Nancy Reagan before they left. I'm wearing my jock cup, a cut-up t-shirt, and a cut-off pair of shorts, and that's my picture with Ronald Reagan. Well, to me, I really love the picture. But guys like that to be around the locker room was what a great experience. You really did. You provided for us. The door you opened for all of us. So.
Well, I was always happy. We were always part of a family. The same way as, as a team is a team. It's like talking to Nick. It's like you're making a film. You're a team. You own a franchise. You're a team. You shouldn't. And we had crazy times back in that era. I had no seats. I mean, so like Reagan would call, his office would call and say, gee, can you come to the game? Oh my God, what am I going to do? And he's got 8 Secret Service guys on top of it. So it was always crazy with the movie stars and the presidents and everybody else
It's a
in the world.
tough life, Bruce.
It was tough. It was
Problems
tough.
you
Yeah,
have.
it was so tough.
When we first got traded to LA, and we knew we had a lot of travel in Edmonton, but when we first got to Los Angeles, our 2 closest teams were Vancouver and St. Louis. And the 4 teams in our division were Calgary, Vancouver, Edmonton, and Winnipeg, and we could only fly direct to one of them at the time was Vancouver. The other ones, there was always flights. We never had less than a 4-game road trip. So bringing Anaheim in really, really helped us. So Bruce actually went out and got us a plane. We had our own plane. I think one of the first pro franchises that ever had their own plane.
Yeah, it was the first.
Brought it from the president of Mexico, but we won't talk about that.
I had to bring a little stash along with us to pay for the plane, But it was.
We were sitting on the runway, and it was '93. I was a free agent at the end of the year, and our planes broke down. So we're on the plane, and we were off to the side of one of the airports, and the captain's walking back and forth. So finally, I remember standing up, bring some levity to it. I was like, okay, fellas, let's spread out. Let's try to find the captain's hat. If we can find the captain's hat, we can take off. And so then I'm leaning up against the wall. I'm like, all yellow, X and free. 1, 2, 3. Bruce at the front of the plane goes, I didn't know you could count that high. I looked up and I said, Bruce, I'm a free agent at the end of the year. 1 million? 2 million?
I do remember that. And you got 3, so be happy. He got the 3. Figure that one out.
I think we'll wrap it up. I want to thank everybody for having it. It's Nick, obviously a pleasure.
Do you have any questions and answers you wanted to ask?
Yeah, sorry, please. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to take any questions, anything that anybody has. There's got to be some questions for Nick and Bruce.
Thank God.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you so much.
Good deal.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
And now there's so much independent film out there. Can you talk a little bit about the pull of the studios like this guy worked for over here compared to how the independents may actually bring back some of that great stuff of the 70s?
Well, I think that from a business standpoint, it's been a few years, I think for a number of years, that the film community has known that the delivery of materials it's the race to see who can get the control of the delivery of the materials. People will always go to movies, but there's such a gigantic market of people watching films from their computers and their homes and how to deliver it to them. And what happens is, films, it is my opinion that films cost a lot of money by design. It creates only a certain amount of people that can fund films. But the young kids today have found ways to make films that are less expensive. They just can't get them delivered in the same way that a studio can. And once that particular hurdle is overcome, it levels the playing field. A lot of talented young kids out there today, a lot of talented people, and I think, in films used to not only imitate culture, but dictate culture. It's kind of like music did. The music business fell off a few years ago, and the film business is, you see what the trend is, that people are making a lot of money with people wearing costumes and flying over buildings and stuff like that, and that's great because kids always want to go see that. But for serious kind of films and films that are really linked to our culture, it's out there. You just as a film viewer have to go and look for it a little bit harder. But in the next few years, I'm sure that they'll find a way to deliver all films. You're going to push a button, you're going to be able to watch any movie you want. They also shoot films on video now, which makes everything a lot cheaper. And you look at the way television goes. There's everything. It used to be, it cost a lot of money per episode to shoot a film. Now, a great deal of the shows are reality-based shows, which are far, far cheaper. Does that 100% mean that there's a lot more talented people out there working? No, but they probably are. The world's changing, man, and it's about time we found some filmmakers to lead the way.
Uh-huh.
Are you guys hungry?
No.
What is it, Steve, that's the question?
That's what, area, yes.
Yes, dear.
No, I was interested in what you just said, film also directs the culture, creates the culture, I think that's very true. Given that the cultures of our major cities are changing, how might film change? The example I would give is that Toronto, now 58% is not Anglo-Christian. It's Chinese, Philippine, and Indian.
Wow.
So what will public film respond to that or use them?
Well, that's yet to be seen, but I mean, certainly, my job as a filmmaker is, my problem with films is this. I go to a movie, and I look at the movie, and I'm like, I've lived a long time. I've never walked outside and seen anything that even vaguely resembles that. So my films, I try to make that at least have some kind of a content that reflects what I'm seeing today. I'd say that if you've got a big, I guess it's it's not a minority, but it's non-Anglo. Yeah, so what would that word be? Anyway, so it has a huge population that's not Anglo, then it's about time to start shooting films in Toronto that reflect that.
Anybody else? Okay, well, I'll give you back the floor. Thank you very much.
Guys, a big round of applause for these guys. We're going to do a quick photo. If Mindy, if you can come up, we're just going to do a quick photo with these guys, and then we'll let them enjoy their lunch, put the music back on, and we do have a golf tournament tomorrow, and we have a big party tonight. So if you guys like this, wait till you see what's coming next.